So Pumla Nabachwa is our first guest speaker, and she will be speaking to us on upgrading your identity for success. Oh, yes. Pumla Nabachwa serves as an economist with the Bank of Uganda. She is a certified financial literacy coach who is passionate about empowering women with tools to create sustainable, positive, mental, emotional, and financial lifestyle change. Pumla is also a mother to a teenage boy. I guess many of us in Uganda have interfaced with us through the BAMP lab, okay? And that's where we get to see her authenticity, her value, and her humor all mixed in. Ladies and gentlemen, joining from all over the world, join me to welcome our very first speaker of the Growth Conference East Africa, Pumla Nabachwa, taking us on with upgrading your identity for success. Pumla, in the comment section, everyone is saying, Wululu, lady with a gem. Wululu, we can't wait. Pumla, over to you to take us on this session.
Thank you, Lydia. Am I audible?
Very audible, very clear. Excited to see you and to learn from you tonight. Very visible.
Okay. Thank you, Lydia. And I'm going to request you, Lydia, to be my personal moderator because I've had a talk like this before and my volume went up and I spoke for like 5 minutes. So if you can help me watch, if you don't hear me, just say something. Okay. So good day to you all. I am truly honored to be here, connecting with people across the bountiful continent of Africa. Identity at its core is actually, before that, I would like to, sorry, I seem to be having a problem here. Just give me a minute. I'm so sorry. Okay, we're back. Sorry, technology. I must apologize and talk earlier. I'm having typical African problems. I don't have electricity in my house. I'm just using like a bright light. So please bear with me. So again, I would just like to empathize with our brothers and sisters across the region in Kenya. And I really pray for your safety and that the cause you're fighting for is fulfilled. And when that's successful, if you don't mind, you can also cross over to this great part of Africa. We kind of have the same problems and we need warriors, we need fighters. So yes, we are speaking identity. So identity at its core is how we define ourselves. And often these definitions are influenced by our upbringing, our society, and our personal experiences, to say the least. Identity is how we describe ourselves. It is what we tell ourselves about who we are. When we speak of identity, we must use describing words. If you remember in school, adjectives are describing words. So now that we understand that, let me introduce myself to the extent that is relevant for today's talk. I'm a happy, positive, curious woman on a continuous journey of awareness and development of both self and the ecosystem that surrounds me. My name is Pumla Nabachwa, and I am deeply passionate about empowering individuals with a small bias towards women to unlock our fullest potential and achieve unparalleled success. So now that we know me a little better, let's contextualize success. Success should be an individualized concept. It isn't about meeting society's expectations, but achieving personal fulfillment. And personal fulfillment as defined and described by you. Because what true success really is, it should align with our inner values, with our passions, with our purpose, with our wellness. And remember, we've had this saying before, comparison is the thief of joy. So it is crucial we must define success not on our own terms, not on Wanjiru's, not on by Wanjiru's terms, not by Mukasa's terms, not by Adebayo's terms. Mukasa must define success according to Mukasa's standards. Wanjiru must define success according to Wanjiru's standards. Amuge must define success according to Amuge's standards. So now we're on the same page. We have the definitions in order. In the next 20 minutes, the shortest amount of time I've ever been given to speak, let's together embark on a journey of upgrading or shifting our identities to align with our dreams and our aspirations. Now let's start with the inner work. And I like the way Noella started, because I'm sure so many things that the other speakers are going to tell you about are more things to do on the outward. So I was happy when I was asked to speak first, because I'm an inner work kind of person. If I don't know 100% that people who I'm speaking to, I cannot give you a one-size-fits-all method of breaking limits and breaking barriers, because we are all different. So I want us to reach a certain point of inner work, and then I can give you the tools after that. So the inner work, the inner us, the core that really, really matters. You know, now back to the definition of identity. Who are you? And we've got to be careful with when we say who we are, because our definitions of ourselves are actually the thing that usually limits us. For instance, they ask you who you are. You go for an engagement that has nothing to do with the parents' conference or marriage conference, and you introduce yourself as a wife, as a mother, as a husband, as a father. It has nothing to do with your profession, and you introduce yourself as a doctor, as a businessman. But what does that mean to you? This is what you are. This is not who you are. Identity is who you are. The what are roles, they are titles, if you may. Our identity is who we are, and who we are is shaped by our actions, by our habits, and by our constant behavior. Again, I'm going to keep asking this so that by the end of this conversation, you can answer the question, how do you describe you to yourself? So let's go here. So what we are trying to do today is to shift our identities to align with a vision of success that we hold in our hearts. And this might sound like motivation, but I swear to you, it's backed by neuroscience and psychology of human behavior. And these are reading interests that I have picked up during my personal development journey. So I want to start from here. I want to start from the brain. My belief system, I believe in science, I believe in neuroscience. I believe in psychology. And for me, when I say something, it has to make sense. When you say something to me, it has to make sense. So I've done a lot of reading and referencing from experts in both fields. And I align with certain things that I felt I should be able to share whenever I'm given a platform. So let's begin by understanding the brain. And I'm sure we have doctors in the room. I'm sure we have neurologists in the room. You can type in the chat where I've fallen short, or you can support, or you can add value in the chat. So I'm going to just explain this, how I understand it, paraphrasing and in my mind in a palatable way to you. Our brain is our most powerful organ, our most powerful tool. And it has two main missions. One is to survive, and the other one is to reproduce. The brain behaves in ways that protect it, and it behaves in a way for it to further its own agenda. So what our goal is today is to push our brains out of their comfort zone and convince it or trick it into working to allow us to thrive. So let's start here. The brain at its core functions based on habits and patterns, repetition mostly. So neuroscientists discovered that our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, our actions are deeply interconnected. And these form what we call neural pathways. Whenever they show like a nice diagram of the brain, there are so many like lines and wires going across. Those are neural pathways. And what these do is they influence how we perceive and interact with the world. So what the brain is able to do is to reorganize itself by forming new connections throughout its lifespan. So it doesn't matter what our age is, what our background is, what our past experiences are, we have the power to change our brain and consequently to change our lives. So this is the thing. After a certain point T, when you reach adulthood and your brain is fully formed, our pathways are set. So these neural pathways are set and we can't undo them. This is according to science. But what we can do is override those pathways by repetition and emotional intensity. Repetition meaning that by repeatedly telling yourself what you want to believe. And emotional intensity is taking that belief and believing in it so strongly in the core of our subconscious that you not only keep telling yourself, but you keep acting in ways that you believe. Because again, faith without works is useless. So initially, so I'll tell you, the brain, again, because it likes habits and patterns, it likes familiarity. The brain does not like uncertainty. It doesn't like newness. That's why whenever we're trying something new, it's very easy for somebody else to come and tell us that, that one won't work. There, the brain is happy because it knows you're going to go back to your normal patterns and where it is familiar. So what we are trying to do now is to encourage you. When you start something new, you will face resistance. You will face resistance. And the people around you are bound to be catalysts into making you fail if you're not strong enough. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that the brain just wants repetition. It just wants you to say and do the same thing repeatedly. So you convince it that, oh, that this is now all right. What the brain tries to do, it's like water. It takes the path of least resistance. So when you keep saying and behaving in a way that you really deeply believe, you create a new way of thought. You create a new pathway. And that pathway becomes so ingrained in your subconscious mind, it becomes your identity. And then your brain starts to align. Your brain stops using the other part that you thought of yourself. For example, if you thought maybe you're not confident, or you thought you're not worthy, or you thought you're not clever enough, or you're not deserving, if that's what your subconscious thought, that's the pathway that's been set. For you to override that pathway, you have to keep telling yourself, first of all, you've got to believe it. You don't just tell yourself that I'm confident, and then you don't behave confidently. You must say it, you must think it, you must perceive it, and you must believe it. And then you must act on it. And then you create a new pathway for your brain to now use. So allow me to share a bit of my personal journey at this point. So I pounced upon what is called the attachment theory. And this hypothesizes that your early experiences and relationships with your parents or your caregivers influence how we bond and relate with other people. And on top of your early experiences, the way you relate with other people can also be influenced by your peer experiences. This is usually during adolescence or the teenage years, and then also traumatic experiences that might happen in your adulthood. So maybe very quickly, they gave me 20 minutes, but let me quickly rush through, quickly. So we have 4 main types, and the main one is that there's a secure attachment, and this is usually a secure attachment. So this is the way how you attach and relate with other people. So secure attachers are people who, in their infancy, they regularly had their needs met. So they grew up feeling competent, but they were also comfortable with their vulnerabilities to a certain degree. So in their adulthood, they are able to express their feelings and emotions openly, and they generally have healthy relationships. Then the other 3 are insecure types. There's the anxious preoccupied, there's the dismissive avoidant, and there's the one in between, which is the fearful avoidant. The anxious preoccupied, they received love sufficiently, but inconsistently. These are people who maybe had very hardworking parents. So when their parents were there or caregivers were there, they loved them. They were there 100%, gave them everything they needed. But when their parents were not there, they were not there. And that's it. So usually these people have a fear of abandonment. Those are the types of people when you're in a relationship and you don't pick up, you wake up in the morning and find 50 missed calls. And when you call them, they're so agitated, they're anxious, they're stressed out. And this happens in one night. Those are anxious attachers. And then you have dismissive avoidance. Dismissive avoidance usually means that they had some of their needs met when they were younger, but others which were more important to them. So their basic needs were met and there was love in their home, but the ones that were more important to them maybe were not met. So they feel a certain kind of neglect and there's a sense of being unseen. So one grows up detached. So they always feel that They don't need other people. They fend for themselves. They don't depend on other people for support because they always felt that their most inner needs were not met. So they learn to rely on themselves for support. And they tend to keep people at an arm's length so that they're not hurt. And then there's the last one, the fearful ones, the fearful avoidance. And this one is usually hinged on mistrust. And this one is a tricky one because they oscillate between the avoidant and the anxious. So these are the types of people who, as children, they kind of were neglected because their parents had some kind of issues, like alcohol or substance abuse, or maybe their parents left the country to go and work and left them here, or maybe their parents went to go and study for long periods of time and left them here. So they often feel neglected, and when it comes to their adulthood, they felt neglected growing up. And when it comes to their adult selves, they kind of oscillate between, I want intimacy and I also want independence in their relationship, which is a little confusing. So those are the three main attachment styles. So I learned that I had a dismissive avoidant attachment style. So I kept people at an emotional distance to protect myself from being hurt. And this stemmed from a mother wound where I just couldn't measure up to the expectations of my highly academic and perfect mother. And so while I did receive love in my home, love full, I'm a child of love, but my mother's love was highly dependent on extreme measures of discipline, extreme expectations of high discipline and academic performance, which typical African home. So both of these things I fell short of in my mother's eyes. So that created some kind of mother wound with me that I never fit to her expectations. So let me just detach, because this is the person who's hurting me the most. My caregiver is hurting me, is not seeing that I'm trying because I'm not reaching her level of expectation. So let me just pour that relationship. But what that does is means that you're going to pour the other relationships. But I learned over time that I was able to kind of work on that wound a little bit. And then that wound got crushed again a little later. And then this is where my story is. So while I thought I was working on my mother wound, I got a father wound. So I got little background story. I got married when I was 23, which is a little young for the current landscape. And within a period of 3 years, I had started my career job. I had had my first child. I had got separated. I had stayed on my own as a single mother. I had paid rent and catering to my own bills for the first time. I had gone through an exhausting divorce process and then eventually became a divorced mother, co-parenting with an ex-husband who was, as expected, struggling a little more emotionally than I was. Because remember, my avoidant attachment style allowed me to detach quicker so that I couldn't get hurt during the process. But this avoidant attachment reached its peak when I received a phone call from my father. So another background story, my father and I, for the most part, we had a very close relationship. It was loving, extremely supportive. It was the kind I wish every girl had with her dad. My dad was the first feminist I knew. My dad supported me. He showed me my value. We had the greatest bond. So while I was going through what I say now is the worst 3 years of my life, because of my age, most of my friends were still living their best lives. We were young. And so they were not equipped to support me. The ones who were married were still going through that tumultuous first years of marriage that I had run away from. So they couldn't offer any support. Then I'm the firstborn girl in my family, which renders my younger sisters equally incapacitated to help me. So where did I seek refuge? In my parents. And strangely, given our relationship, it's my mom who leaned into me. Misery loves company. Women become closer to their mothers, and after they become wives and mothers themselves. When they are struggling, that's when you find women connecting more to their mothers. So our relationship really had improved over time. My father, who was my bestie, who was my rock, on the other hand, has always cared so deeply what society thinks about him. So he in many words said that, so really what happened is that he felt that he couldn't go out in public with a divorcee as a daughter. So when I did reach out to him, remember, this is my rock. This is my person. So when I did reach out to him, he in many words said, Pumla, if you've chosen this path, I hope you know that you're on your own now. It was the hardest statement that I had ever had in my life. It burned me to the core. I didn't talk to my father. I hung up. Like when he said that, I was like, oh, wow. Because I was not backtracking. They had raised me to be independent, to take full control of my decisions. And now when I make a decision that's so pertinent to me is when they decide to drop me, unless I make a decision that's more favorable to them. I said, I'm sorry. My happiness comes first. I was 24 years old at the time. I put down the phone and I didn't speak to my dad for 1.5 months. So he didn't even see his grandchild for that period. And his wife could only see me for quick periods and in secret because she followed her husband's leadership. So this period, it shook my life so much that it pushed me into a corner where I now identified as an island. I could do anything and everything on my own. I didn't need others to support me. I detached completely from my connections emotionally. I was present physically, but literally turned off emotionally. And no disrespect to people of the faith, but even my sexual relationships, because I was sexually active, but I had no real link, no inkling of emotion. So I identified as detached, extremely independent, and super reliant. And while those words seem like, oh, that's not too bad, they're extremely terrible as a human being. Human beings were designed for connection. So while, yes, I might agree that some of these things protected me from being hurt, this also meant that I was missing out on the full experience of loving and being loved. Time passed, time went by, and I realized that it isn't time that heals wounds. No, it is the deliberate effort over time to heal that heals wounds. Because it had been ingrained in my subconscious years ago that I mess up, because my mom had told me that I do mess up, I believed that I do mess up. And because I believed that I messed up, that became my identity. I just believed that I messed up. And for the more that I believed it, I did continue messing up. And then this rendered her ideology true because I just kept messing up. But then when I did a lot of reading and soul searching, and I understood that it was within my power to trick my brain into thinking different, I started to tell myself that I am deserving of being loved for me, not for my achievements, and not the way I show up for other people, just for me, and that I was enough. And that's when I started working on my inner self. And because the brain likes repetition, I started repeatedly acting like the person I wanted to be, a much better version of me. And see, this is something I like to tell people. We can't keep blaming our past of the things that happened to us a while ago or in our childhood. We can't keep blaming our past experiences on who we are today, because after a certain point T, we must do the work. We are the work. Science says that there's a point T when your brain is fully developed. And this is when the frontal cortex, this is the front of the brain, the part of the brain which is responsible for reasoning, for decision-making, and for self-control. That's when that's when your brain becomes fully developed. And they say that age of 25. So they say this is 25 plus or minus 2 years. So from 21 years and older, you are the creator of your circumstances. You are no longer a victim of them. So we must be able to take responsibility for our healing, for our growth, for our realities, for our identities. And imagine, my consequence was small detachment. People have been raised or have experienced real trauma. People have been brought up in poverty. Poverty is a traumatic experience. Not knowing what you're going to eat, where your next meal is going to come from, having to work as a child to tend to your basic needs, to get money to tend to your basic needs, having been grown up in a home of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual neglect, having unstable parents, depressed, mentally ill parents, substance abusing, alcoholic parents. People have been brought up in war. People have been refugees. People have been resettled into places far from home. We all have stories to tell. And by fire, we must tell them. But we also must be doing the work to heal the damage, to stop the internal bleeding, and to also stop bleeding on people who did not cut us. So the realization that I am the work, and I must be accountable for my healing and growth was pivotal in reinventing my identity. So we can speak about upgrading our identity, but there's those of us who have to first reinvent our identity. And yes, so identity again is a culmination of actions. that eventually become our habits. So if you want to identify as per your religious or your culture or your political beliefs, then your habits must align. When you tell me that you are a Christian, what do you mean? Because we've seen corrupt Christians and they are given front pews in church. So who are you truly within? Are you loving? Are you joyful? Are you patient? Are you kind? Are you peaceful? Are you good? Are you faithful? Are you gentle? Do you practice self-control? If you present yourself as an African, or a Chikuyu, or a Chaga, or a Tusi, or a Yoruba, or a Muganda, describe what that means. Are you respectful? Are you hardworking? Do you have a sense of unity, a sense of community? Don't tell me what you are. Tell yourself who you are and then upgrade that identity to the most respectful, the most hardworking version of yourself with a deep sense of unity, with a deep sense of community, because the only way we can be successful is by repeatedly being the person you say you want to be. And that is it. And so up-identify. So people like to talk about upskilling, but there's up-identifying. So you can up-identify and upskill simultaneously. So you're saving money. You want to start a business and you've been saving money and maybe you've now started this startup. Are you saving to recapitalize your business or are you eating the money? Your actions and your habits must show what you believe, what you want to be. You want to be a renowned author or you want to start a podcast. Are you a great communicator? Are you relevant? Are you dynamic? Are you working on those skills? Are you working on those qualities, on those traits? Are you being the person today that you want to be tomorrow? Because that's the inner you. 5 in 10 businesses fail because people have told you, just start. But they are not telling you what to start on. Start working on yourself towards being the entrepreneur, towards being the great wife, towards being the great mother, the great author, the great business person. Work on the qualities that make you those people. So let me tell you another story very, very quickly. In the process of re-identifying, so as I said before, that sometimes how you identify can also limit you. Noella hinted on this earlier. And funny story, there was a time in my life when identifying as a woman was limiting to me. Why? Because in the African context, women are nurturers, not providers. So I found myself in a space where, as a primary parent to my child, and by the way, his father was satisfactorily providing for him, but while I was married to him, he was providing for me as well. He said, I didn't touch my money. But now I found that I had to do a lot of heavy lifting. It was time to provide sustainable shelter and security for myself and my child. I had found myself shifting. I lived and rented places every year because there was something about the places that we were renting that I felt was not secure, that was not what I wanted. And I found myself in a place when I'm saying, I have no roots for my child. So I started to contemplate building a home and I started to seek guidance. But you know that guidance of when you're asking, I'm sure we all have these friends who come to us and ask for guidance and then they do what they want. So I was that friend. I would ask people for guidance, but I would still pay another year's rent and go stay somewhere. Until one day I was like, you know what? I don't like where I am right now. I have moved in 4 different places in 4 years. I need to settle down. I have a child. So I contemplated with the option of becoming a homeowner and my brain fought me. Because even though I was raised in a progressive environment, I didn't know a single woman close to me or in my life who had ever built their own house. And definitely not one who had built their own house under the age of 30. So because this was unfamiliar, I struggled for a while. And then I realized that it is because of the masculine role of provision is so institutionalized in my subconscious. The woman title could not see beyond the intensive labor and the involvement, and might I dare say, the wives' old tale of which man will ever approach you or date you or marry you when you have your own house. But see, our teachings forgot to include scenarios where women actually do end up alone and choose to be independent, if not forever, for at least a while. So you know what I did? I just started to identify as a person. I stripped myself of the woman title because I felt it was easier to strip off the woman title than keep repeating in my head that I can do this, because I had said I can do this for 3 years and it was just not. And then I realized my subconscious is because I'm identifying as an African woman. And as an African woman, I've been taught that I must be provided for. I can't build my own house. I don't know I have no data. So I just stripped the title of woman, and I started to identify as a person who needed a sustainable and logical way within my means to provide shelter and security for my child and myself. And then I started to act on it. And just over a year later, I became a homeowner. And then that old wives' tale of can you attract? And imagine, because I had upgraded my identity, the men I started to attract, the suitors I started to attract were of higher value. Because when you upgrade yourself, I tell people all the time, when you're going for a date, if you're using a border, tell the border to stop you far, to stop you somewhere. Let him not reach the gate so that your date sees you on the border, because that is the level that date is going to look at you, full stop. So you must position yourselves as high value women. If you want to attract high value communities around you, you must position as a high value woman. So because I had upgraded my identity, I started to attract high value men. So, and just to finish off this story, I re-identified as a woman after that later, because right now I'm in my feminine era. Playing masculine roles became exhausting for me. So I've started to find a comfortable balance. And because I'm working on my avoidant personality, I'm now able to ask more people for help. I've realized I'm not an island. I'm able to lean into my partner or my brother or my male colleagues or my male community, or at least I have the financial independence to pay for people to do for me masculine things that I don't want to do. And just to tell you, because we're mostly women here, money might not buy happiness, but it is truly important. It's an important ingredient in upgrading ourselves to financially be independent and ultimately financially free. But that's a whole session for another day. So we've talked about visualization. So now we're on the tools, the real steps. We've talked about you have to practice, visualize your goals, and they must be specific. You must write them down. You must define them. What do you want to be? So imagine that person. And while you're imagining that person, then you must start acting like that person. So when you frequently envision your future self, and then you embody the traits of the successful self you want to be, you trick yourself into believing that you're already that person. So this is the funny thing about the clever brain. The clever brain cannot tell the difference between what you have thought of many times and what you've actually done. It can't tell the difference. So when you keep thinking of something and then you actually start to do it, the brain doesn't resist you because you thought about it so much, it feels like this is normal. That's why if you think too much about your problems, more problems come, because the brain gives you what you want. So the more you think about something, the more you get. So if you think good, you get good. If you think bad, you get bad. So the future is not going to be what you want. The future is going to be who you are. So just act like the future that you actually want. The next one has been talked about all the time, positive self-talk. So the way we talk to ourselves matters. And you must have a positive mindset. That's the only thing that gives you abundance, because your thoughts have power. Our thoughts become our emotions, which become our words, which become our actions, which become our habits, which becomes our identity. And our identity becomes our reality. So replace your self-doubt with self-encouragement. And I swear to you, if you start to cultivate a positive mindset, you will only attract positive outcomes. Then Atomic Habits, there's a book I read called Atomic Habits, and you look for micro habits that you can change about yourself. Small things. If you want to identify as somebody who likes their body and is healthy, then start by eating a fruit instead of bacon and eggs and sausages for breakfast. Like, just start on the small things and then keep doing that every day. The most important one to me, the most important tool is gratitude. Be grateful. Practicing gratitude shifts our focus from the things that we lack to the things that we have. So instead of thinking that, oh, grumpy Monday, be thankful. that the day didn't start without you. Be thankful for the job you have to go to. Be thankful that you have transportation, regardless of what it looks like. Be thankful that for the gift of a new day. So be thankful. This shift in our perspective. I'm winding up. I'm winding up. Just one more minute. Just one more minute. So this shift in our perspective attracts more positive experiences into our lives. So just to remember, shifting your identity is not about becoming somebody else. It's just about uncovering your true self. And that's all it is. So I just want us to remember that the journey to success starts with us. It starts with a single step and it starts with us. So I hope that this has been a starter and has given us something to think about as we embark on our journey of breaking limits and being the best version of ourselves. I could speak for hours if given the time, but let me stop there. And I hope you picked
could also listen for hours. That was amazing. Guys, join me to give a big hand clap to Pumla. That was amazing. It was not just inspiring, but it was also backed up, you know? So I like something that you said, when you're 25 plus, you're the creator of your circumstances. So just in case you're here on this call and you're 25 plus and still saying, my father, my mother, my boyfriend, my ex, my grandmother, the witch of my father's house, my unfriendly friends, whoa, your balloon has just been burst. 25 plus, you are the creator of your circumstances. So we shall only just take 3 questions. So the people who joined us early are in the Zoom room. You get the opportunity of actually asking questions. So just post 3 questions that I will allow Pumla to answer as we get ready for Lydia. She also talked about something interesting. She said that to upgrade, you need to reinvent. I liked that. Okay, so some of you, just in case you're thinking of upgrading, probably the first thing you need to do is I'm waiting for the questions. Please, do you deal with imposter syndrome? Elizabeth Igaga, stay with us. Lydia Waidera, who is our next speaker, is actually going to deal with imposter syndrome. There's something also interesting that I noticed, that Pumla is very intentional about her growth. So you guys will just be there seeing her thinking she's enjoying life. Hey, woman is reading. And I could already notice 2 books that she's reading. She already mentioned one, which is Atomic Habits. The other book that she also mentioned is, she didn't mention it, but I know it's a book called Attached, and I want to recommend it. The guys who are in the group, the guys who are in the WhatsApp group, we are going to try to get you that book. Attached is by Dr. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. It's a very powerful book. I think that's one of the books that will help to reinvent. I could see she started to reinvent herself by understanding who exactly she is. And then she says we have to do the work. So just in case if you're thinking that pastor is going to lay his hands on you and all of a sudden your identity is upgraded, hey, smell the coffee. Pumla has just told us that you need to do the work. Thank you so much, Pumla. That was amazing. So I don't see any questions on this side. So let us move on to our next guest speaker. But just in case a question comes your way, please, even those people on YouTube, send those questions. We shall be able to get those questions, be able to send them to Pumla, and she'll be able to answer them. We shall be able to share the answers to those questions. Pumla, thank you once again for that rich presentation, valuable, backed up with knowledge. We are not just going to say we're upgrading for, we know that we have to reset our brains to give us the life that we want. So if you're ready to upgrade your identity, just type in the comment section, I'm doing the work. If you're ready, just type in the comment section, I'm doing the work. Those who are ready, just type in the comment section, I'm doing the work, as I get to introduce our next session. Yes, I see. Amanda from Rwanda has said, I'm doing the work. Daisy from Uganda is saying, I'm doing the work. Henrietta is saying, I'm doing the work. Oh yes, Gloria Nakami is saying, the work I'm doing. Deborah Nambasa is saying, I'm going to do the work. Oh yes, ladies, Gloria Sekenya is saying, I'm going to do the work. Fortunate says, I'm going to do the work. Maggie Chihunde says, I'm going to do the work. Yes, ladies, we can't upgrade without the work. Let's go do the work. Let's go read those books. Let's go start our journeys. Let's go change our stories, because when we change our stories, we can change other people's lives. The reason Pumla is here today speaking about her stories because she did her work. She did her work, and so we are enjoying the transformed her. She could have died with her father's identity of her. She could have been, frustrated with her father's identity of her. She did the work, and we're enjoying the healed and revived and upgraded Pumla. Thank you so much, Pumla. So stay with me. Once we come from Pumla's, yes, you can upgrade identity, and then imposter syndrome, like Pumla's. What was hitting Pumla there in the house was imposter syndrome. Who owns the house at before 30? So Lydia Ziwa is going to